Hello and welcome aboard the Gallant Says podcast. It is Thursday, May 23rd of 2024. We're recording this Thursday night at 11:35 p.m. Central Time. Couple of comments already. Reflect the Sun shouting out from Seattle. Are the Astros actually going to catch my Mariners? It seems like the AL West has turned into the AL Central. Frontrunner says, what up, though? What's up with you? Guys, I've got some bad news, and it has to do with Houston Texans OTAs. Let me get my hot take voice on. The Texans season might be over before it even began. Why? LaReMy, TuNsiL, and StEfOn, GGS are at it again, being bad teammates and skipping OTAs. Can we take DeMeco Ryans seriously as a head coach if he can't get two of his most important players in the building? Is CJ Stroud truly a great leader when he's spending time spilling state football secrets to Chinese youth or focusing on cleaning up after a derecho, risking injury lifting trees and heavy branches, not to mention wasting throwing reps by playing catch with children? I've got to say, the Houston Texans might be missing the playoffs entirely based off of the fact that two of their most important leaders can't even show up to work. All right, let's get serious here. The NFL is king because of how crazily my colleagues handle this time of year when legitimately nothing is going on in the NFL. And I know some people, you see the off-season training activities. There's a couple of media availabilities for those. Generally, there's two. There used to be three. You're starved for football. Who hasn't been starved for football? We got a long way to go. And you'll notice a lot of people that are my colleagues are going fucking crazy when it comes to over-analysis of what's been going down. And specifically, what went down the one day where, one, media members were actually allowed to watch what was going on at practice. There's one more. And two, the press conferences where we actually got to hear from DeMeco Ryans, from new linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair, who actually was a pretty entertaining listen, Dalton Schultz, Jalen Petrie. I'm going to break this to you and to anybody who might be watching this who is a colleague and covers the NFL for a living. Nothing newsworthy happens during OTAs. Not anymore. Some guys won't be there. Guess what? It's voluntary. The guys who don't show up are usually guys who have played well enough that they don't need to show up. It's voluntary. And just ask DeMeco Ryans about what this part of the offseason is all about. Said DeMeco, it's not about physicality. We're not truly competing and going against each other. It's a matter of guys getting in shape when training camp comes. If that's all it is, then I'll be honest, why pay any attention to it at all, you know? Now, you'll see some highlights of guys in shorts. A select few of those highlights will look awesome. You'll also see some quarterbacks. Caleb Williams is the one who got dragged through the mud today. Have bad moments. The good, the bad. Ignore it all. I saw one person, and I don't want to throw this person under the bus because he's enthusiastic. He's excited to see that the Texans are out there. But he was overanalyzing a throw from CJ Stroud to John Mechie. He was trying to talk about the way he was running the route and the correct shoulder if he was looking over the right one. And I know that he thought that he put out something that was really like good, profound. It wasn't. That's sort of the way things go this time of year. So, what else happens at OTAs? Okay, well, maybe you see guys working with specific groups, and this is somewhat noteworthy. Kamari Lassiter is working with outside corners Jeffrey Okudah, C.J. Henderson, Derek Stingley Jr., and other outside corners. But that was just one day. A lot of people think he's going to be competing with Desmond King to be the slot cornerback, but, I mean, we'll see. Again, he's a rookie, and I think that a lot of us, at the end of the day, we just have to take a chill pill. Just because there's content this time of year does not mean, a lack of content this time of year does not mean we need to turn everything into the biggest thing ever. And I say that to show you some extreme clickbait bullshit. I don't know what Sports Talk Extra is. I do know I am jealous of their YouTube following because they've got almost 3 times as many as mine. But when I look at the thumbnails right here, I mean, I just want to shoot myself in the head. This is bullshit. This is just to be perfectly honest, clickbait bullshit. I'm pointing at one. Houston Texans coaches blown away by new corners. Then it says, this is huge. There's a cute graphic. There's an arrow there. Right next to it, it says, this is unreal. Again, do what you got to do to make that buck, to build that brand online. But Houston Texans coaches blown away by new corners, that's literally wrong. Just wrong. The actual quote from DeMeco Ryans when he was asked about specifically Jeffrey Okudah and C.J. Henderson was complimentary, sure, but it wasn't anything more than that. I'm pulling the actual quote itself in front of me right now. Thought I had it in the rundown. I don't. Let's read it. What stood out to me most about them is you see elite movers. You see why these guys were top 5 picks. They have the movement skills. They are big, fast, long corners that can run with anybody. And they have had some ups and downs in their careers. This is their 3rd team and short careers. But as I've told these guys, I don't care what happened in the past. Blown away? That's the conclusion that guy got to? John Ryan comments, I hate clickbait. Well, look, I put clickbait at the front of my video because the game be the game, right? I got to adapt. But if we're looking at what was actually said at Texans OTAs, what was interesting? We heard from Texans tight end Dalton Schultz. Perhaps he'll be canceled for this problematic quote, as you'll hear right now.
It's great to have, a fully loaded clip, metaphorically speaking.
A fully loaded clip. Oh, my God. Did he really just say that? Did he really just say that? Is he a gun violence promoter? Wow. But, I mean, he didn't really say anything else that was that noteworthy. I mentioned that I actually loved what I heard from Azeez Al-Shaair, who is the new Texans middle linebacker. If you want to know how to be great, guess what? Azeez Al-Shaair, he's got some tips for you.
But in that same tune, when you're a rookie coming in, it could be so overwhelming. So I talked to him, and I talked to all of them, but talking to him and just try to just get him to, calm himself down, slow it down, just get back to the basics, work the techniques that we're doing in individual, apply that to the field, because for a while you won't be able to let your instincts kind of take over until you constantly do the same boring, repetitive thing over. And, people try to see, how do you be great? What does it look like? It looks boring because you're doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And if you could perfect those little things over and over.
I mean, yeah. Being great is boring. It's good advice. He was asking about advice that he was giving to some players, and the YouTube video, for whatever reason, skipped over for a second there. But being great does involve lots of hard work, a lot of not fun work. Work I try to do myself, but I'm sometimes too lazy about. Note the procrastination when it comes to the Gallant Says podcast of late. But I really liked listening to Azeez Al-Shaair, and there's something else that I think you guys should be very excited about, and it has to do with Al-Shaair's relationship with DeMeco Ryans. For those who don't know, Al-Shaair played with the San Francisco 49ers for the first couple of years of his career. DeMeco Ryans was heavily involved in the scouting process of them eventually drafting Azeez Al-Shaair. He goes to the Titans, but sounds like the Texans were interested in him last offseason. He went to Tennessee. He played very well in Tennessee. Now he's here in Houston. Here is Al-Shaair talking about DeMeco Ryans.
DeMeco is somebody who, I've seen like a father figure. I think just our relationship over those 4 years and how it grew. We done had laughs, cries, and cussed each other out, everything in between, over that time span. And he's taught me so much. He's one of the best coaches I've ever had. So it was definitely like green light, no-brainer going there last year, truthfully. But when you talk about from the business standpoint of it, just making the best decision financially for myself, and obviously the team as well. Me and Nick don't have any type of, rapport other than DeMeco at that time. So I think it just – I had stuff that I had to prove on my own. I think people in the building knew who I was and what I could be, but nobody outside of that building truly knew, like, hey, can he do it by himself? Can he go off and, be this player on his own? So I think it just didn't work out from that perspective. But went to Tennessee. It was a great group of guys I was able to play with, and got to be with Rand. So that was pretty cool too. And had a good year there, and things worked out now. So I think. It worked out how it was supposed to, for sure.
We'll see how he plays as an actual member of the Houston Texans, but for DeMeco's part, you hear him talk about Azeez Al-Shaair, and you're going to think that he might be the most impactful addition the Texans got in an offseason where they got Stefon Diggs, Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry, among others. Here's what he said, quote, "I interviewed him at the Combine several years back. Very sharp player. He could drop the entire defense, talk about blitzes in and out. He is a very smart player, still in the same way he is today. He brings a very calming presence to our defense. Just his ability to communicate and run the show as a linebacker, he allows the other guys around him to be calm and to play faster because of what he brings to the table when it comes to communicating," which I imagine, pause for a moment, is very key given the fact that the Texans also brought in Jimmy Ward last offseason. Jimmy Ward, a guy who had some familiarity with DeMeco Ryans' defense in San Francisco. We didn't get to see him a whole lot on the field, but was helpful to bring a guy like that in, I'm sure, into the locker room as a sort of translator for this defense. And now you got a guy in the middle of the defense who is doing the same thing, that's coming off of a very good year. Continued DeMeco on Azeez Al-Shaair. Not only that, communicating, but he can also go make the plays, and that is what you have to have at that linebacker position, and that's what he's going to do. Azeez is as tremendous as Dalton Schultz. He is a tremendous leader as well. He is a leader of men, and I am excited to have him on a roster and just seeing him continue to build the relationships with all the guys in our locker room. You should be excited. You should be excited about that one. Now, will he live up to those expectations? It's words, and I did say a little bit ago that you got to take everything that you hear this time of year with a grain of salt, but it does sound like this is perhaps the most important acquisition for the Houston Texans defense because they do need to have somebody in the middle of the whole thing. What did we hear from Jalen Petrie? Well, I do feel like there's a good chance that Kalen Bullock, the safety that they drafted out of USC, ends up being their most impactful player year one because the Texans don't really have a safety that can play center field over the top, and Bullock supposedly can. Here is what Jalen Petrie had to say about Kalen Bullock. It drew some annoying media laughter. Bear with it. Here is Jalen Petrie.
Oh, man, he's a dog. Like, when I first seen him, I'm like, bro, it's tall. And then, no, for real. He for real. I'm like, bro, it's tall. Like, Like taller, like he looked like a receiver. But just being in a room with him, you could tell how locked in he is. Like he's answering the questions sometimes before the veterans. So, it's good to see a guy that come in and, be confident in himself and get to work because, he definitely can help this team.
So that's Jalen Petrie, everybody. Okay, so Kalen looks tall. I don't think everyone should have laughed that hard at that. Jalen Petrie at the Improv, everybody. But there you go, guys. That's, I think, all the interesting quotes that we heard from Houston Texans players at OTAs. I didn't get to go out there and watch. Guess what? I didn't miss anything. They're in shorts. And as DeMeco Ryans said, they're working on getting in shape. DeMeco Ryans did have some things to say, but I do think that DeMeco Ryans is better to read than hear from. I say that because DeMeco generally speaks in long, not quite Nick Caserio long sentences, and is very good at talking around answering specific questions. Like when he was asked about competition in the secondary, he completely talked around it. Talked about competition at every single position on the field. Maybe trying to take some pressure off of the secondary. He also made it sound like if there's ever a year for Kenyon Green, former first-round pick, to figure it out, one where he had a full offseason and is injury-free, this one is it. He also changed his tune a little bit about the primetime games. A couple of weeks ago, he said, we don't care when, where the primetime games will be. We're just going to show up every single Sunday and try to play our best. But he did say, we're excited. It's a big deal. And I'm sure that has to do with the fact that this is a young football team. And they have been pretty excited about all the possibilities that a season with primetime games presents. Dameon Pierce, also per DeMeco Ryans, has apparently changed his body. And DeMeco mentioned that a 1-2 running back combination featuring Joe Mixon and Pierce is what they're looking for. I feel like we can't give up on Dameon Pierce. I think if you have eyes, and if you've watched enough football, you know that Dameon Pierce is about as difficult to tackle as it gets among running backs in the league. That is a skill. It's a skill that you don't want to toss to the side. There were a lot of people that were impatient with him last year, almost as if they forgot the way that he played the year before when Davis fucking Mills was his quarterback. Imagine how stacked the boxes were when you watch this guy in film and see all that he's capable of doing. I don't think you should give up on Dameon Pierce. I'm not saying draft him in fantasy football or anything like that, but I feel like his talent speaks for itself. Reflect the Sun asks, what happened to Dameon Pierce last year in fantasy football? A great question, because he was someone that I wanted to take but was taken off of the draft board that I was in quickly because I'm in a fantasy league with a bunch of people from Houston. Pierce was a little too impatient. Bobby Slowick's offense is one that calls for patience and waiting to find the hole. Pierce doesn't do that. Pierce likes to explode into the hole and try to run people over. So you want a guy with vision, I guess, as a running back in this system. I think Pierce and that vision, it's possible that we'll see it this coming season. It's also possible we'll never see it and that he needs to go somewhere else to actually thrive as a running back. But I do think that if he goes to the right team, he will be very good elsewhere. The guy is a violent runner. He had a kick return for a touchdown. He's a pretty special player. And it was nice to see DeMeco Ryans talking him up. But again, talking him up, talking Kenyon Green, even talking Azeez Al-Shaair up, it's all words. That's all it is. That's really all of the stuff coming out of OTAs right now is. It's just fluff, hullabaloo, et cetera, tropes, quotes that you hear over and over again, you know? Brandon Halam comments, can't blame a man for wanting to explode into the hole. Jesus Christ, Brandon. This is a family show, even though we're recording it at 11:54 now on a Thursday. The Houston Texans schedule release. I was going to do an episode talking about the schedule release, and then I procrastinated. I'm sorry. Like I said at the very beginning of this, schedule release day, much like overanalysis of OTAs, is another reason that the NFL is more successful than the other major American sports. They have found a way to turn random, meaningless events every single month of the offseason into television events, into broken down on the internet events. Starts with the NFL Combine. The NFL Combine, largely meaningless. The interviews that happen there are important. That's the one thing that we don't actually see on TV. What a guy runs as a 40 time does not matter, ultimately. I've said that once. I will say it for the end, till the end of time. I mean, the fact that if you get in that weird-ass stance and get out of your, that stance as in the correct way, you can shave off 0.2 seconds. I'm speaking from my own personal experience. First time I ever ran a timed 40, I ran a 5:02. Gerard Johnson, Texans quarterback coach, taught me how to get in a proper stance. The next time I ran a 4.84. It's one of those things that you'll never, ever, ever, ever do on a football field, and it's overanalyzed. But that's February. Free agency in March. Okay, free agency, that's actually pretty interesting. The NFL draft in April. But then after that, what the hell do you talk about? Well, the NFL's found a way to space out things over the course of the rest of the months so that there's always a little bit of something to get your football fix in May, in June, and July. In May, first, you've got the schedule release. Then after that, you've got OTAs. You'll get a handful of quotes. People will do what they will with those quotes. June, you've got football minicamp. Those are mandatory. Then July, eventually, you have training camp. You're going to have some hard knocks released. The NFL's great at making this thing a year-long thing. Problem is, for people like me who've been covering the league long enough, we kind of know that a lot of the stuff that happens actually doesn't have a whole lot of meaning. But, okay, schedule release day has actually become an event, a television event. People are breaking down who's got the toughest schedule, who's got the easiest schedule. And it's funny because we know who every single team is going to play before the schedule is released. We just don't know the order. Ultimately, schedule release day is really about planning weekends and buying flights, especially if you let the NFL run your life like I kind of do. But the overanalysis is game by game, way too early previews. Do they have the bye week at the right time? Is it better to start fast or close strong? Did my team get enough primetime love? Why did this team get primetime love? They fucking suck. Who was the best order of opponents? We already knew they'd play. So, what about the Houston Texans schedule for 2024? Let's look at it. Week 1 at the Colts. Week 2, home against the Bears. Caleb Williams. That one's Sunday Night Football. Week 3, at the Vikings. Week 4, home against the Jaguars. Week 5, home against the Buffalo Bills. Week 6, at the New England Patriots. Week 7, at the Green Bay Packers. You'll note that up to this point, outside of the Sunday Night Football game, all of their games are scheduled for noon, and then a game Week 8 against the Indianapolis Colts. After that is where things start to get fun, where the Texans actually are going to get shown in primetime. And I'm thinking the NFL decided to wait to this point in the year to show them in primetime because while they do feel like the Texans are probably going to be a contender this coming season, and since they have C.J. Stroud, they're interesting, I think they want to know whether or not they will be good by this point so they could potentially flex them out of big-time games. So Thursday, Halloween, the Texans are on the road against the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. The next week, they have another Sunday Night Football game against the Detroit Lions at NRG Stadium. The week after that, Monday Night Football at the Dallas Cowboys. That ought to be fun. Sunday against the Jaguars, Week 12. Sunday against the Titans, Week 12. At the Jaguars, Week 13. And then you've got this 3-game stretch in 10 days that fucking sucks. Miami Dolphins at NRG. At the Chiefs on the 21st, a Saturday. Sunday Night Football. It's on NBC, but it's a Saturday game on NBC. On that Saturday. And then Christmas Day on Netflix, they play the Baltimore Ravens. That sucks. They wrap up the year on the road against the Tennessee Titans, so perhaps you have a bye week in Week 18. The really only takes I have about the schedule, because we knew this schedule was going to be tough going into the year. The 3 games in 10 days against the Dolphins, Chiefs, and Ravens just sucks. It sucks. Player safety, whether or not we'll actually be able to watch the game with full attention, because I think for a lot of people it's difficult to get away and watch football on Christmas. Thanksgiving is another thing, but on Christmas, might be very hard. It might be very hard to get away and actually watch the game. Generally, when I'm with my family at any holiday, and even me, a guy who works in sports, and they all know I work in sports, it is hard for me to be able to get away, take control of the television, and actually put on football so I can watch the football. It's hard. So that sucks. I don't like that they're playing 3 games in 10 days. They don't care about player safety. We already knew that, but 3 games in 10 days, come on. Sucks for the Ravens, too, who are dealing with the same thing. The Week 14 bye also sucks. Week 14 is when you're getting the bye week, that late in the year. I suppose going from the 25th to whenever they play their Week 18 game against the Titans, I suppose that having 10-plus days, that's nice. It's like another bye week, but you almost want your bye week in the middle of the year. Whatever. They have the 4th toughest schedule in the NFL, regardless of the order. And outside of the AFC North, it's the toughest schedule in the league based off of last year's record. Does the order really matter all that much? I don't think it does. Speaking of off-season stuff, I wanted to do this too. And I spent a lot of time getting ready for this, and then I procrastinated and didn't actually do the show. But NFL draft grades in the week after the NFL draft is real bottom of the barrel content. It's impossible to grade a draft before anyone actually plays it down. That's the first thing. The second, everyone's grades are wrong, and they're wrong so often. And on top of that, the grading's really, really generous. I'm sure Reflect the Sun will get a kick out of this, YouTuber from Seattle. No one wants to end up being stained like so many people who, after the 2012 Seattle Seahawks draft class, they got Fs. And I mean, it's a draft class where they got Bobby Wagner, they got Russell Wilson, they got Bruce Irvin, among others. It's one of their best draft classes. 2011, 2012 is how the 2013 Seahawks came to be. Also because Matt Schaub threw a pick 6 to Richard Sherman. That's in that game where the Texans actually were winning late. That one, another perhaps catalyst in the Seahawks 2-year run where they were an absolute terror, especially defensively. So to go to the draft grade thing, I don't fault the people who do them, much like with the people who are overanalyzing OTAs or overanalyzing the schedule. These are people who are probably being told by their bosses to make content out of this stuff. Draft picks that have yet to even suit up for the team that they've joined. So these bosses are telling them to make draft grades. They believe that content in list form is as good as it gets. And to be fair, there's a lot of people that, do like list articles. Easy to get through, easy to digest. So, much like the Pro Bowl and NBA All-Star game, these things generate clicks, ratings. My guess is because NFL fans out there, after the draft is done, you're hoping that someone somewhere is going to confirm their draft dreams that their favorite team nailed the draft. And speaking of nailing, just like with porn, you're going to have all sorts of options when it comes to who grades what your team did in the NFL draft. Now, what should really happen is someone should go 3 years from now back and grade these grades, but no one will actually do that. We're going to totally forget about the grades that we gave to a draft class literally 12 months later and do the exact same thing again. There's going to be new people in the game. They're going to be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, not jaded and beaten down like your boy here. So I decided a couple of weeks ago, and sorry that I did not get this out in time. We're trying to get better about putting the content out, but sometimes your boy just gets a little bit too lazy and procrastinates too much. But I'm going to grade the effort put into these grades. We'll do it 1 through 5. Because when I went to Thayer Academy, the most douchey sounding middle school that kind of looked like Hogwarts in Braintree, Massachusetts, they would grade you on effort. They would give you a letter grade. That was the achievement side of your report card. And they would also give you an effort grade. And I thought it was really funny that the one time that I got straight A's in 8th grade, I got high achievement honor roll, but I did not get on the effort honor roll. I got like, basically they said like, well, you didn't try, but you got high achievement. Well, hang on. I got my best grades ever. Oh, no, actually you didn't. And I thought it was crazy that a grade of 2 in a class that didn't matter, drama. And by the way, I was in a play that was off campus. Thespian. That ultimately made me not go on the effort honor roll. Am I still bitter about it? You bet your bottom fucking dollar I am. Anyway, let's grade the NFL draft grades. How about this? I'm gonna put on a little hat. You know, let's grade the draft grades. All right, let's start with, I got a ruler too. See, it's clear. I'm going to smack it like it's Catholic school. Let's start with Chad Reuter of NFL.com, who gave the Houston Texans an A-. Take a look at this. A lot of work put into it. Oh, wait, hang on. It's just a list of the draft picks. Grade day 1, grade A. Day 2, grade B. Day 3, grade A. An A-. So he did give the Texans an A, but if you read through this, our boy fucked up. He had 2 paragraphs, and he had to just get through the 2 paragraphs calling the Houston Texans the Houston Texans. Do you see right here? He called the Houston Texans the Vikings. What are you fucking doing, dude? What are you fucking doing? So, they get a 1, which translates to an F. Come on, man. Come on. Just because they made a trade with the Minnesota Vikings doesn't mean they are the Minnesota Vikings, okay? So that's the first grade that we do. Grade number 2. This is Pro Football Focus. Pro Football Focus gave the Houston Texans a B+. And honestly, take a look at it. There's a paragraph about every single one of their draft picks. All 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I like it. They gave him a B+, a little bit of a generous grade. I'm also a little skeptical of college football, Pro Football Focus grades. So I'm going to give this a 4, which equates to a B. But that's pretty good. That's pretty good because some of these graders are just a little bit too generous. What you're going to notice is that for the most part, everyone's just going to give them a C+ or above. No one ever does an F. No one ever does a D. All right, who's up next? How about Mel Kiper, ESPN? He gave the Texans a B+. 3 paragraphs here. At one point, the very end, Houston GM Nick Caserio pulled off a solid, if unspectacular, class for what he had to work with this weekend. How does solid, if unspectacular, get above a C? That, Mel Kiper, gets a C. You get a C for that draft grade of a B+. Yeah, some of us went to private school and actually grade tough. Do you see my little tassel on my graduation hat? Cap? I don't know what it is, whatever. Pete Prisco. You know what? I like Pete Prisco. He has large calves. I'm impressed by them. But I'm not impressed by the, length of this write-up. He has balls and actual opinions. He misspelled Nick Caserio along the way. Cesario. No, it's not Cesario. But he said, Kalen Bullock is a rangy safety who will give him depth this season and eventually become a starter. Worst pick, I didn't like the pick of corner Kamari Lassiter because he ran a 4.64 at his pro day. Not great for a corner. C- for this draft grade. Who's up next? We got, the CBS Sports, B+. For not having a first-round pick, the Texans got good value with their picks and shored up some holes in the secondary. That was it. 0 effort. It's 1 sentence. 0. This is past failure. This, expulsion. How about the Ringer? There's a cool-looking graphic, that's for sure. They gave the Texans a C+. Houston came into this draft with below-average capital after trading their first-round pick to the Vikings last month. They also said that they debated including StEfOn Diggs in here in the grade for the first two sentences. But then if you get into this, they talk about Blake Fisher, and they say he's a potential starter on the offensive line. It's a little vague, and something that I think you'd say if you forgot that Titus Howard, who says he's a right tackle only on his Twitter profile, is the actual right tackle. So, D. I guess that gets degrees. Up next, you got The Athletic. The Athletic ranked the Texans draft class 28 out of 32. They didn't give him a grade. Honestly, probably smart. The Texans didn't have a draft pick in the top 40, putting them at a disadvantage for these rankings. They did, however, draft two promising players in the second round, Lassiter and Blake Fisher. Day 3 pick who could surprise, Cade Stover. So, I don't know how they gave him a low 28 ranking when they graded some of the day 2 picks. Kamari Lassiter a B+, Blake Fisher a B, Kalen Bullock a C+, as well as they did. So I'm going to give this a C. It's satisfactory. At least they had balls to put the Texans 28th. Up next, we got Bleacher Report. This one, a lot of work put into it. Look at this. I mean, that's good. They gave the Texans a B+. There's some quotes from Nick Caserio. There's some quotes from scouts. I like it. Some takes. I'm going to give that a B. Associated Press. They gave the Texans a B+. Hard to follow up a draft where they took C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson Jr. Okay, so one of your 3 sentences is about last year? F. Yahoo. Gave him a B. The Texans didn't have a first-round pick, but they still grabbed a few quality players, including a starting nickel corner and developmental offensive tackle. Okay. They have a favorite pick. They have a least favorite pick. But they also referenced last year like the ones before, and they only talked about those first 2 picks. They did give some details about Kamari Lassiter and Blake Fisher, but come on. Let's talk about the rest of the draft. I'm going to give this a C. Fox Sports. Ben Arthur graded them. I like him. A. Yeah, we can be biased. We can have teachers' favorites. Warren Sharp gave the Houston Texans a B+. Instant impact, Kamari Lassiter. Best value, Kalen Bullock. Riskiest pick, Blake Fisher. Lassiter and Bullock could push veterans for starting jobs in 2024. Sharp strikes me as someone who thinks his football takes are gospel and there's not enough work put in here. So, D. Or a 2 on the 1 through 5 Thayer Academy effort scale. What's next? Sporting news. Texans got a B. The Texans had a sneaky supporting draft for what they did with DeMeco Ryans and C.J. Stroud. What the fuck is sneaky? Why are you talking about last year's draft again? A lot of these draft grades, you'll notice, are talking about last year's draft. I don't know. Talk about this year's draft. What are you fucking doing? Some more. Walter Football, B-. I like Walter Football a lot as a website. They gave the Texans actually a B. I thought it was a B-. They asked some fair questions, but they, like many others, are pushing this narrative that they might move Blake Fisher to right tackle and then Titus Howard back to guard. I hate it, but I like Walter Football. So there you go, guys. These are all the draft grades that I graded for the Houston Texans. Ultimately, draft grades are shitty filler to fill the time during a long NFL offseason. It's like what we old people used to do on road trips. We look at road signs and license plates to pass the time. We've all got phones and tablets now. We've got other things to look out too. So just know, if you're obsessed with the NFL to the point that you're looking for content in schedule releases and what's going on in OTAs and draft grades, you have other options. You're allowed to enjoy your life. Should I say this as somebody who hosts a show that depends on people being passionate about sports? Perhaps not. Let's continue. While we're on grades, I would like to give an F to the most recent example of a sports story drifting into the culture war. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, I am talking about Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker's commencement speech at Benedictine College in Atchison, Kansas. Oh, what a transition, damn, Paul. That's why they pay you the big bucks. That's why you're recording a live stream at 12:15 Central Time in Houston, Texas, from a room that some have compared to a basement. I watched Harrison Butker's commencement address because no one will shut the fuck up about it. And yeah, I suffered through another commencement address. Commencement addresses suck. Whether it's the valedictorian, true story, the SI Newhouse School of Public Communications, the girl who was the valedictorian in my grade gave a speech that seemed to be based on, in fact, was based on, if you give a mouse a cookie, which reminded me so much of Billy Madison's speech about the puppy who lost its way and as it relates to the Industrial Revolution. That happened. But then the next day, for our 9 a.m. commencement, we got an address from a guy named John Craig Venter, an American biotechnologist known for leading one of the first draft sequences of the human genome. Smart guy, right? Nerdy guy. I went to Syracuse. I was hoping we would get a broadcaster. Doesn't matter if it's sports or not sports. Maybe it would be Aaron Sorkin, who, by the way, spoke to them the very next year. I thought we would get someone fun, especially considering my friends had to shake me and wake me up at about 8:30 to get me to go to said commencement because the night before, as one does the last weekend of college, I got absolutely shit-faced with my friends. I think I fell asleep on a park bench for a little bit of time. Anyway, I made it to the commencement, and after begging enough people for little small clear cups of water so I wouldn't be completely dying and sweating out all of the alcohol there, I heard this man, Jake Craig Venter, give this speech. I found the transcripts online to confirm what I thought I'd heard. He began by saying, for those who don't know me, I'm obviously not Snoop Dogg, Bob Saget, or Martha Stewart. We know it's 9 a.m, and we would prefer that someone worth getting up for, shaking off a hangover for, was speaking. But here's what this guy said. Here's a real cheery statistic. 60 million people will die on this planet this year. That number will grow to 68 million by 2030. About 10% each year die from injuries, including auto accidents, which for your group is the number 1 killer in the U.S. 15 million of those 60 million will die from communicable diseases, but 37 million will die from non-communicable diseases, including heart disease and cancer. And that number in your lifetime by 2030 is going to grow to 51 million people. So hopefully you can see the important role that genomics and preventative medicine can play in your future. By the way, I'm sure you all know that on the order of 5 million children die each year from malnutrition, a number that's likely to increase with the expanding population. Like, this is what that guy did at our commencement speech. Just the most depressing numbers about how the earth is fucked, apparently. Really, the takeaway was, yo, the earth is kind of fucked, dog and dogettes. I hope you take on the challenge of figuring it out. So that was our commencement speech. It varies school to school, I'm sure. And at the religious schools like Benedictine College, which is a Catholic liberal arts college in Atchison, Kansas, maybe there are different expectations. But I actually watched Harrison Butker's entire commencement speech, and I took some notes. He really started this bad boy off with a bang. How about this quote? From all the adversity thrown your way from COVID, I hope you learn the important lessons that suffering in this life is only temporary. As a group, you witnessed firsthand how bad leaders who don't stay in their lane can have a negative impact on society. I mean, I don't disagree with that part. I lived in Seattle during the pandemic. I felt like they were a little bit too cautious, draconian even, and way too slow when it came to rolling back some of the restrictions. It sucked as somebody who had just moved up there, who didn't know many people in a city that's not very social, that I had to stay locked inside when I am the pinnacle of health to prevent others from getting sick. Selfish, sure, but we all have lives that we want to live. And I wanted to actually go and explore the Pacific Northwest. Instead, I was stuck in a apartment over the top of a Starbucks that eventually got broken into, which led to me being featured on the Tucker Carlson show. We'll do an episode on that later in the summer. He continued, Harrison Butker, and I mean, again, he's really going for it in the first couple of minutes of his speech. Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values in media all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder. Ooh, look at these big old words. Pervasiveness. Some would call me a pervert. I suppose that's sort of along those lines. He continued, another point that I actually agreed with. Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly claims that he's Catholic, proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally. He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies. Harrison's going strong with the verbiage here, that I'm sure to many people it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. Now, you probably think to yourself that given that those two paragraphs right there, Harrison Butker talked about abortion, that he's going to rail on abortion for the entirety of the speech. Those were the only two times it's mentioned. I know we all have varying opinions on abortion. I'm just going to say mine. I'm not going to tell you how to feel. I was raised Catholic for what it's worth, but I lost faith. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the actual institution of the Catholic Church. And it kind of turned me off on religion altogether. But my belief is that just given how crazy it is that one single sperm cell can meet with an egg, if those two things meet up and there's a chance of life with the odds of those two specific tiny things meeting in a woman's womb and then eventually perhaps turning into life, it's such an incredibly long shot of that happening. There's a part of me that feels like that should be seen through because generally things like that happen because, not all the time, of course, of carelessness. If you're careless and you create life, should you get to snuff it out before it even has a chance when that chance was already crazy for those two things to meet? But again, this is up to everybody. I'm just telling you how I feel. I'm sure the comment section is going to go crazy over this. But that's just how I feel about it. I feel like in cases of rape and incest and stuff like that, okay, if we're talking about abortion, it definitely should be something that's considered. I know in Texas that's not the case, but again, this is just how I feel. You can feel however you want about it. It's the United States of America, baby. Butker continued in his speech, as members of the church founded by Jesus Christ, it is our duty and ultimately privilege to be authentically and unapologetically Catholic. The cultural elite want to see in Christianity private, hidden away, and harmless. I thought that part was interesting because I do think for the most part we have gotten to a point where there's a lot of people that don't want to see religion thrown in their face all the time. And, I mean, that's kind of one of the reasons that the United States of America exists, right? I mean, there were a lot of people that were dealing with all the amazingly bloody wars of Europe over small differences between Catholic and Protestant. Some of them were so sick of religious persecution that they said, we're going to go over here. And obviously it started as colonies and eventually it turned into a country. But there has always been religion in this country, and at the same time, there has been a desire to keep religion away from government, the separation of church and state. If Butker feels that Catholics need to be authentically and unapologetically Catholic, then that's how he feels. And I'm sure other Catholics feel the same way. And it's understandable why so many would feel the same way. Someone who was raised Catholic, because right after that bazooka of an open, he spoke for nearly 10 minutes about how the Catholic Church has to get its house in order, calling on priests and bishops to be better shepherds. No shit. They're what led to me being a Catholic in name only. I'll say this, growing up in Massachusetts, I went to a Catholic church, St. Mary's in Hanover, Massachusetts. It was an incredible church. We had a great choir that was constantly like putting out CDs and doing things in Boston as a group, which for me, growing up in this small suburban town, I thought was incredible. This group, this church had really good priests who got to know everybody in this parish, that could communicate well with everybody in that parish. They gave great homilies after the Bible. If you've been to a Catholic Mass, there's a lot of rituals, and it does feel like most Masses are the same thing over and over again. But if you have a good priest, you actually might take something away from it. That church was awesome growing up. It really was. But, you know, as I get older, my parents split up. My dad left my mom. And this is where things started to get a little bit dicey for me, because my mom, who had been left, started seeing her high school boyfriend, whose wife had passed away, and the Catholic Church would not let them get married in the church. And I thought that was bullshit, considering we were going to church every single Sunday. So that was part of where the Catholic Church started losing me. And then I remember over winter break, my sister's boyfriend, who was studying at Notre Dame, basically just told me a bunch of things about religion that he learned in a theology class. And it made me ask a bunch of questions. And with the internet really starting at that moment in time, I did research on my own. And unfortunately, it kind of shattered my faith. Then on top of that, everything that happened in Boston with the horrible, horrible things that priests were doing to altar boys, which was not that far removed from the Catholic elementary school, St. Paul's, that I went to growing up. John Gagan specifically, like, who's the number one of all the bad priests in that area. It makes you lose faith in the institution as a whole. If Butker's a devout Catholic and he's calling this out for 10 minutes, good on him. And then we got to the actual bombshell quote. I'm going to play it and let you watch for yourself, because I think there's a lot of people out there that haven't actually watched it. I think you've seen a lot of strong reactions one way or another to it. And that's the unfortunate part about where we are as a society today. Everybody feels the need to, one, have an extreme take, people in my shoes, about events that are polarizing. Instead of just offering it, sharing how they feel about it, they choose to be preachy, and not just preachy, also psychotically argumentative to the point of being an asshole. But I'm sure some of you guys out here actually haven't seen what Harrison Butker said. You might have seen some quotes. You might have seen such strong reaction from people that you like, that you feel one way or another about what was said. But if you didn't see it, this is the part that seemed to drive everyone crazy.
For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment. You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
That's the quote. Now, the beauty of the United States of America, it is 100% your choice to react to this as you see fit. And I will never tell you how to feel about something like this. Because I know there's a lot of people where you're like, you know what, I actually agree. I know there's also a lot of people that are like, fuck this guy. Here are my issues with what he said there. I want to know the specifics when he says the diabolical lies told to women. You can't tease that without paying it off. Any radio person like myself can tell you that. 2, knowing little about Benedictine College, but a lot about the Catholic faith, assuming the majority of the people there are most excited about their marriage and future children at age 21, 22, is exactly that, an assumption. Now, he's older, more life experience than the kids that are there, but that's an assumption. And 3, my issue with a segment of this speech here that actually got him emotional. He's using anecdotal data to tell us how marriage and being a homemaker has brought someone else happiness. He's speaking for his wife here. Honestly, it would be interesting if he had brought his wife up and had her talk about this side of things. So those are my issues with it, but I don't find myself angry with Harrison Butker. I don't feel that he is telling people how things should be. I think what he's saying is that his wife found happiness as a homemaker, as a mother, and that there are many paths that you can take in this life. And clearly there's a lot of people who agree with them. How would the NFL entirely sell out of women's Harrison Butker jerseys just days after the speech if it was something else where everyone was in agreement that this sucked? But the reaction to what Butker said, at least in media, has been pretty aggressive, right? You'd think he was calling for all women to get back in the kitchen, bitch, based on the reaction it got. A couple that I noticed, Michelle Beadle, you might remember from ESPN back in the day. By the way, it's also my freedom of speech to say, go fuck yourself, Harrison Butker. That's my freedom. I'm not going to lose my job. And he should also have that right. More from Michelle Beadle. Quote, as a woman, I think everything he said was garbage. Pause. Having watched the whole thing, I don't think everything he said was garbage. That specific part right there, as a woman, you're probably going to feel a lot more passionate about what he said one way or another than I possibly could. He continues saying, I think when you hide hateful thoughts, feelings, and bigotry behind the cloak of religion, continued Beadle, I tend to roll my eyes and stop listening. Were there hateful thoughts there? Was there bigotry? Again, watch the whole thing. I'm telling people to watch a commencement address. Jesus. Sorry, don't want to say that around you, Harrison Butker. My bad. Granted, I think the fact, continued Beadle, that there were women in the audience that were not okay. I mean, granted, there were some that clearly were, but there also were some that weren't, that have come out since and been like, what the hell, dude? We just worked our asses off for years, and you're going to come in here and tell us that's all cute and stuff, but what you're really going to want to do is get married and have babies. Then you'll feel important. Like, go fuck yourself. I don't think that's what he said. Maybe he implied it, but I feel like a lot of people didn't get mad at this until a couple of people spoke out about it, and other people were like, yeah, fuck Harrison Butker. He's a kicker. Who gives a shit what he has to say? There's also Laura Rutledge on ESPN who said with Courtney Cronin, certainly everyone is entitled to their own opinion, as they said there today, talking about Andy Reid, talking about Patrick Mahomes, Roger Goodell. Courtney, I would just say my opinion is it's really great that you and I get to be women with careers. He didn't say, though, that women don't get to have careers. He said that they've been told diabolical lies, and I wish, again, that he had said what those diabolical lies were. But he wasn't telling people to return to the kitchen or that we should go back to some sort of rather fundamentalist theocracy where men have all the power, like, I don't know, the Middle East. I felt that in that little part of this speech that he said there are many paths to the pursuit of happiness. And I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm going to get canceled on this. But I'm speaking from my own anecdotal evidence. There's two important women in my life. There's my mom, who was a homemaker. I'm so thankful that my dad worked his ass off to the point where my mom could stay at home and take care of me and my sister. And then there's my sister, who is the smartest person I know. She went to Harvard. She's a surgeon. She literally hours ago just had her second kid. She had a kid before that who was my godson. Two totally different paths. I feel like both have found happiness. So as an American woman, maybe it's not glamorous to be like the homemaker or whatever. And maybe it would kind of suck to like hope that you're going to find the right guy who you can get married to and not end up getting divorced with, given our divorce rates, and that it's going to go perfectly, this marriage, this lifelong journey. But I mean, you can go do that. You can also be all about your career. You can try to be a homemaker and have a career. That's what makes our country great, is that we have all these options. You're not put in a box, like, again, like we see in the Middle East, where you don't have any fucking rights there, you know? Now, to Beatles' point, would I want to hear that right after graduating if I was a woman? Probably not. Probably not. I think that point was actually fair. But as someone who has put off serious thinking about a family while in pursuit of a career that might never ever come to be what I dreamt it would, I wonder if I'd be happier if I focused on building a family, or maybe stuck with my faith. Doors that are left unopened. We have so many of them. This was the most controversial part of the speech. Having watched it, I think we all watched it together. Do we feel like it was that controversial that he was telling people that this is how things should be? I mean, he continued, and he had some takes on sex. Heterodox ideas abound within Catholic circles. There's nothing good about playing God with having children, whether that's be your ideal number or the perfect time to conceive. No matter how you spin it, there's nothing natural about Catholic birth control. I respectfully disagree. I am the shittiest Catholic ever, perhaps, but having looked online at all the things that the Catholics frown upon as far as birth control goes, I disagree. I like sex. I don't want kids right now. That might be pervasiveness, whatever. I'm guilty. Do you, everybody out there, but I feel like if you're going to have sex, you should be very responsible about it. And kids are going to be kids. So whether it's against those kids' religion or not, shouldn't they learn about birth control? Don't you want your children to have the best lives possible? Don't you want their children to have the best lives possible? And I think it starts with some sort of planning, but that's just me, okay? I'm not trying to preach here. There was some hyperbole about masculinity towards the end. Part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, because I feel like I constantly see the right talking about absentee fathers in the black community and how it might help if they were in the home and stop violence. So that part seemed like bullshit a little bit to me. He continued saying, as men, we set the tone of the culture. And when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. It's a good writer, Good speaker. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we have here in the U.S., and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well. Is there violence here? Yes. Does it pale in comparison, though, to violence across the world? Even with mass shootings? Yeah, for the most part. Why do you think so many people are flocking to our southern borders and overrunning it? They want to get the fuck away from all these shitty countries that are out there. There's a lot of violence in them. Have you seen what's going on in Guatemala? And what has been going on there for years and years? Mexico right now? I mean, that's just in North America. And then you have all sorts of people that are fleeing from the Middle East and going to, I believe, Honduras and taking this unbelievably dangerous trip all the way up to the border to possibly be turned away when they even get to the border, if they even make it there. So, sure, there's violence here, and perhaps absentee fathers are part of that problem, but I don't know about the way he said it there. Butker continued saying, be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. I think that's an interesting way of putting it, and I disagree with him here. Is it really emasculation, or is it a belief that all should be equal? You know, the execution of that belief has been very slow, but it has been all over the place for all of our nation's history, more than any other country. Again, aren't we slowly striving for that in some way, shape, or form? I do think that the idea of toxic masculinity is fucking stupid, but are we really being emasculated? I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's some people right now that disagree with that. I want to wrap it up with this, and I'll read some of your comments. It's late. I should have done this earlier. Harrison Butker said plenty of things that many different people have completely different perspectives on. Welcome to America. And while I don't agree with everything that he said, I think that there's a lot of people out there who were disingenuous in their reaction to it. As I said before, I'd be surprised if every person with a hot take on Harrison Butker's speech watched the whole speech. And by the way, he's a good public speaker, let alone those hot takers actually reading the transcript, which also helps. And ultimately, what I hate coming out of it, because there are so many people that are in this industry and are looking to draw attention to themselves or their outlet or whatever, instead of these different perspectives and questions that could have been asked after Harrison Butker's speech was done, with people that have different opinions. Instead of that, it's turned into an online shouting match between smarmy intellectuals and intolerant people of faith. I put both of those in quotation marks. Intellectuals, people of faith. The intellectuals are comparing Butker to the religious leaders in the TV show The Handmaid's Tale. The latter are using this as another example of Christianity is under attack. Ask Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, because they find Butker's ideals outdated. Are either of those things true? Butker's like the religious leaders in The Handmaid's Tale. Christianity is under attack. I don't think they are. So really, in conclusion, think about how much time, including yours truly, we wasted getting angry about a fucking kicker's commencement speech at a small college in Kansas, of all states. I want my 20 minutes and 35 seconds back. I'm being asked if this is pre-recorded by Largo Goes, no, but I scripted it out, buddy. You know? I appreciate you guys sticking with me. It's really interesting seeing our Twitch comment section. Our Twitchers are perhaps my most loyal watchers and listeners. And they are 100% running the show right now. You guys are fiends. But I love you. And on that note, guys, you can catch this show, the current plan, Monday and Thursday nights. We might do this on a daily basis. But for now, I got to be realistic about what I can do and how well I can do it. And I think if I do this every single day where I'm talking about sports and then talking about something political or divisive in nature, I feel like I have to really put in the work to make sure I know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. So Monday nights and Thursday nights at a time to be determined, hopefully 8 o'clock, something that's before, I don't know, 12:45, seeing as this show has been going on for an hour and 11 minutes now. But I appreciate everybody who did stop by. You can do it at youtube.com/PaulGallant or twitch.tv/GallantSays or on X @GallantSays, on Instagram @SportsGallant, Facebook.com/PaulGallantSports. You can also get it wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher. I guess Google doesn't exist anymore. But until tomorrow at noon, ESPN 97.5 and 92.5, I am merely Paul Gallant. So long, farewell, and have yourselves a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. This show will be back Monday night. Until then,